Algebra 2. So today's Monday, September 20th. Today we're going to start new notes for Unit 2. Tonight's homework is 6 problems that are at the end of this recording. The 6 problems are on the last slide of this presentation. So the essential question is, how do we solve absolute value equations? And at the end of this lesson, you should be able to say that I can solve absolute value equations algebraically. And then note, if you did not finish or did not take the performance task on normal curve statistics, you need to come into the acing period to make that up. The triad does close this Friday. So the notes, the homework, classwork, Desmos, Edpuzzle assignments that are from the beginning of school on August 17th up to September 25th, all those assignments, if they're not completed, they will not be accepted for points after this Friday, September 25th. So make up your missing work, please. Extra help is available during acing periods. You may also email us for help, myself or Mrs. Fairbanks, and you may also ask us in the chat on Google Meet. So right now, I just want you to sit and listen for just a minute. This is just a review of basic algebra. This is solving equations, and you solve equations using inverse operations, and you watched a couple of videos last week on this. So if you had an equation of x plus 23 equals 90, to undo addition, you use subtraction. That's the inverse. So the inverse operation of this addition of positive 23 is to subtract 23 to both sides. 23 minus 23 would be 0, and we can cross it out, and x would be equal to 67 because 90 minus 23 is 67. And we just draw this wavy line through equals to remember to do whatever we do on the left side, we do on the right. And likewise, if you want to undo subtraction, then you use addition. So in this problem where it's what number take away 12 is 74, the opposite, inverse means the opposite. What's the inverse or opposite of subtract 12? It's to add 12, so you add 12 to both sides, and 74 plus 12, x would be worth 86. And then to undo multiplication, you use division. So if you had this problem of 4 times, and you know there's a hidden red, I'm putting that red dot in between the 4 and x, that's the only math operation that you can add. So you'll always see like a plus sign or a minus sign. This bar means division on this problem over here. But this one is always hidden. So it's 4 times what number would give 48. To undo multiply, you divide on both sides. And that's what this bar means, is to divide. And you always divide by whatever number's in front of x. So 4 divided by 4 cancels. X would be equal to 48 divided by 4 would be 12. And on this problem, I don't really prefer how they drew this, so I'm going to take this off. So if you see, there's a hidden 1 in front of this x, and you can kind of see that that means 1/3 x, and what you do there is you multiply by the denominator on both sides. So times 3 on both sides, because 3 divided by 3 would cancel to that 1x, and 18 times 3 is 54. Okay, so that's a basic of what you should have known from 7th and 8th grade, and we're going to move on. I still want you to listen for just a moment. This is a basic review of absolute value. Do you know what absolute value means? And do you know what absolute value, how you know a problem is using absolute value? You know that because of these bars. So absolute value will always have these 2 bars. So you can see it right here by the -4. You see it right here by the +4. You see it over here on the -3. So those bars around a number or an equation means your problem has special steps for absolute value. So maybe you remember what absolute value is, maybe not. So let's go over that. The absolute value is just a distance. So you're looking for the distance between what? Between some number and 0 on the number line. So for instance, right here, what's the absolute value of -4? So you go to -4 on the number line. And what's the distance from -4 to 0? Well, distance is 4 spots until you get back to the 0. So the absolute value of -4 is 4 spots, or a +4. Distance can never be 0. Distance, like your height, is a distance. So your height might be 5'8". You can't be -3'2", right? So a distance is always a positive number. So this problem is asking you the absolute value of 4. So what's the distance? Well, it's 4 spots back to 0. So the answer there is also +4. So the absolute value of a -4, the absolute value of a +4, they both come out to be equal to a +4 because they represent the distance back to 0. Excuse me. So this is just a couple of problems on the side here. What's the absolute value of -3? 1, 2, 3. The answer is +3. What's the absolute value of 0? Well, 0. There is no distance back to 0. It's exactly there. What's the absolute value of 5? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 spots. So the absolute value, the final answer, would be 5. Okay, so today you're going to need a piece of paper labeled notes number 10, and then you will also need another piece of paper for the homework labeled homework number 11. So now this is notes number 10, absolute value, and you're going to now start copying for your notes. So be ready to take some notes. So these are the steps. I expect you to copy down the steps that are in this box. And if you just listen for a minute, you can, as soon as I'm done talking, you can go ahead and write down your notes. You can hit pause, right? So I'm going to talk first, and then you can hit pause. So the first step is to isolate the absolute value. So on this right side, that means the only thing that should be next to equal are those bars and whatever's inside the bars. Okay, that's what it means to isolate the absolute value. Then you're going to write the equation twice. So that is the steps that you're learning today. How do you solve an absolute value? You always write the equation twice. Once with a positive answer and once with a negative answer. So here's an example of that over on the side here. So they took this problem and they wrote it with a positive number, and then they wrote the exact same thing, but on the right side, it's with a negative number. I kind of like this example where they draw the 2 arrows. So from the original problem, you write one with a positive answer and one with a negative answer. After that, you're just going to solve, just like we did earlier when I reviewed solving equations, and then check your answer to make sure that you don't have what's called extraneous solutions. What an extraneous solution is, it just means you get a number answer and it looks like everything should work out fine, but if you plug it in, it doesn't work. So we'll talk about extraneous solutions another day. We're not going to have any examples of those today. All right. So now you're going to hit pause and you're going to copy down everything that's in this box. And if you liked these little extra examples, you can draw those as well. Come back to the video when you're done. Okay, so now we're going to continue and we're going to do 3 examples. All right, here we go. So remember, the first step is to isolate, which it is. The only thing next to equal sign is the absolute value. That's what it means to isolate. So now we're going to write it twice, once with the positive, once with the negative, right? So I kind of split them like this. So x minus 5 equals with a positive 13. X minus 5 equals with a negative 13. So once with a positive, once with a negative. So it's only the right side, this 13 part, that one will be a positive, one will be a negative. This other part, the x minus 5, always stays the same on both sides. You only make the right side. Oh, let me just adjust that here. Oh, that didn't work so good. Sorry, I changed my eraser and it doesn't want to work well. Let me just put that back in. So one's with the positive, one's with the negative. Okay, the next step after you do that is to solve. So we draw this line. Do the inverse operation of subtract 5 would be to add 5 to both sides. 5 minus 5 is 0, so x here would be 13 plus 5. There's one answer, x equals 18. And to solve the other side, I always like to draw that line through equals, whatever, just keeps your work nice and neat. So opposite of subtract 5 is to add 5. 5 minus 5 is 0, so x would be what's negative 13 plus 5? That would be negative 8. So what's the final answer? Well, you're going to have 2 because we have to count for both sides of the number line how to get back to 0. That's why you're getting 2 answers. So we're going to write x is equal to x is equal to 18. I'm just reading from this side. And x is equal to negative 8. Okay, so a lot of times we write it with this comma in between. So the other thing I just wanted to say, in my classroom, FA is going to stand for final answer. So a lot of students will, when the work gets complicated, they're like, well, where's the final answer? So instead of writing out the 2 words final answer, I just tend to write FA. Moving on to the next one. Okay, so remember the first step is to write it twice, once with a positive and once with a negative. And then the next step is to solve them. So subtract 3, the opposite operation is to add 3. 6a would be equal to, what's 9 plus 3 is 12. Next step is to divide by 6, because you're undoing that hidden multiply, because this means 6 times a. So you divide by 6. So a would be equal to 2. And the other problem, add 3 to both sides. What's negative 9 plus 3? That would be a negative 6. Remember, there's a hidden multiply in between 6 and a, so we undo that with division. You always divide by whatever's in front of the letter. And what's a negative 6 divided by 6? That's a negative 1. So your final answer is a is equal to 2 and negative 1. Okay, moving on to the next problem. Same idea, you're going to write it twice, once with a positive, once with a negative. So you're going to write 3 minus 8y equals positive 19, and 3 minus 8y equals negative 19. Draw your line through. And be careful on this. If I were just to cross this out, this is a positive 3. So you should be subtracting 3. I get a lot of students who think, oh, this doesn't want to work again. I don't know. Somehow my eraser changed. I apologize. I just wanted to focus your attention on that. Okay. Sometimes I get students who think that this negative, this subtract sign, goes to the 3. It doesn't. It goes to the 8. Because there's a little hidden plus there, right? So you're subtracting 3 on both sides. Okay, so 3 minus 3 is 0. Bring down the negative that's on the 8. And 19 minus 3 is 16. Remember, there's a hidden multiply dot in between the negative 8 and y. That's why we're dividing on both sides by negative 8. So what's a positive over a negative? That's negative 2. 16 divided by 8, and a positive divided by a negative is a negative. Same thing on the other side. This is positive 3, so we're going to subtract 3 on both sides. Make sure you bring down negative 8. And 19 negatives and 3 more negatives is 22 negatives. To undo that multiply, you divide on both sides by negative 8. This cancels. And then don't panic. So let's first take care of the negatives. So it's a negative over a negative. A negative number over another negative number is a positive over a positive. They cancel, right? Positive plus plus is what they used to tell you in middle school. Then you have to check, can you reduce 22 over 8? Yes, you can. You can divide out 2's, right? So anytime you have even numbers, you can divide out at least 2's. So if we divide out 2's, what's 22 divided by 2? 11. What's 8 divided by 2? 4. Now you have an odd over an even, so you can't reduce anymore. So what is your final answer? X equals negative 2 comma 11 fourths. Okay, so we're done with the notes. Please make sure you labeled your notes number 10 on the left side of the paper we just did. Sign your name up on the top, and then make sure that you upload your notes to the digital workbook. You can do that in a few minutes. Now, the next slide is your homework, so you have to continue with this recording, and then make sure you do your homework tonight. So here's homework number 11. So you're going to take out a new piece of paper, and you're going to do these 6 problems. And then I'm just going to remind you that don't forget, you're going to be writing this. One says positive 4, one says negative 4. You're going to write them twice. So that's the lesson for today, because we're doing absolute value. You write them twice, once with the positive and once with the negative. So this one you would write positive 25 and negative 25. This one positive 16 and negative 16. Okay? And then there are a few of them that are fractional answers. One of the fractions you can't reduce and one you can reduce. So don't panic, you will get fraction answers. So you do have a choice. You can just copy these problems and complete them on separate paper. Or if you have a printer, you can take a screenshot here and print this slide at your home. Okay? If you want to do the printing option, the very next image right here, I'll leave it up for a second. This is what you would want to take a screenshot of so that you can print it at home. So it's a little bit bigger. And that's it. Thank you. Make sure you upload your notes and do your homework tonight.